The content you're about to hear may be graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
Oh, how I wonder what it's like to relax. See the sky down under. Hope my plans collapse. Oh, how I'm under the surface of my tears, falling down asunder the meaning of my years.
This is True Crime XS.
It's that time of year that is so strange for me, where the weather turns, but also the news changes. And I think weird things happen to people when it starts to warm up and people start coming out of their houses more.
Because they're getting over cabin fever.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I wanted to start off. I have a couple of stories to talk about, and then some news on the case that we've already covered. I wanted to start with this case out of, I think it's Long Island, the way it was presented to me. I was trying to put the pieces together, but it's a piece of news that popped up on March 11th in Oceanside, the Daily Voice. It's a pretty short piece that Michael Mashburn wrote up. It's about a pretty old killing. It's 50 years ago, 52 years ago. And we never really talked about this case, but I did have it on a list to cover because at some point there was an announcement about it. I'll talk about that. But it says, killer ID'd in Barbara Waldman cold case. So Barbara Waldman was a woman who, back in 1974, was killed inside her home. She's 31 years old, and she's found murdered inside her residence on Sally Lane in Oceanside. There was a press conference that came out this last week from the Nassau County Police Department, which is, they've been in the news for a lot of stuff. The biggest thing they're in the news for right now is the Long Island serial killer. The case had remained unsolved for 5 decades, but recently investigators have used genetic genealogy to develop a DNA profile. Now, this DNA profile, it was announced that they were going to be looking for information on this case. And I thought it was pretty interesting when you see homicide squads working with the FBI, and then you see them throw in the word investigative genetic genealogy.
It's very common now.
It is. It's it used to be unheard of, and now it's a weekly occurrence. But this is one of 2 cases that was announced this week to have been solved. And obviously, the DNA labs that are taking care of this are all out of Texas, primarily Othram. The announcement I had seen was that in 2024, investigators had brought them some forensic evidence on one of these cases. And so that turned out to be the Barbara Waldman case. But the ABC in New York, they had put up just a staff article on Friday the 13th, of all things, and they confirmed that it was her. Now, they released a composite sketch at one point in this case. They never had viable suspects. The case was cold for most of that 50 years, but they kept going back to it. And I think when they were able to get a DNA profile, materials that were sufficient for a DNA profile over to Othram, I think that's what really solved this case. They identified a man who lived a few blocks away from Barbara Waldman. He had been working as a sanitation worker, and I think the way they're describing him is basically he's a garbage man. His name was Thomas Generazio, and they confirmed that they believe he killed her. Unfortunately, he died in 2004. At the same time this was being worked on, they also announced that progress had been made in another New York case where the New York State Police had been working same way, leads on a cold case. But this was from a 1970 cold case. In March of 1970, decapitated remains were found near Andover, New York, on a rural road in Allegheny County. According to the New York State Police cold case database, they had determined that the remains were those of an adult male whose head and hands had been removed and an X had been carved into his chest. At the time, they were pretty sure he had probably been the victim of gangland violence. So we used to see this in movies. It was very common in the TV show Sopranos. They have the Pine Barrels. The idea is someone's involved in organized crime. The hands and head are removed to prevent identification, and a body is dumped. I don't know what the significance of an X carved into a chest would be, but it all led to the New York State Police saying, we believe this is the victim of some kind of organized crime execution. Just like the other case with Long Island, in 2023, investigators teamed up with Othram, and they started kind of doing the opposite. Whereas in Barbara Waldman's case, they were trying to identify DNA material from evidence that they had collected back in 1974. And they were trying to figure out who had taken her life. They knew who she was. In this case, they have the body. They don't know who the body is. So it's a little different. But they're able to create a profile from known samples of the body. And the FBI starts a follow-up investigation in 2024 and 2025, and they find potential relatives of this John Doe. This guy has been a John Doe for, I think they identify him in 2025, so that would essentially be 55 years.
Yeah.
They're able to get a positive identification on him, and they determined that he was 35 years old at the time that he died. He had been living in Genesee, Pennsylvania, and his name was Clyde Coppage. So he's not from the area, but I did notice that the New York State Police's BCI, their Bureau of Criminal Investigation, they put out an announcement that they were looking for information in that cold case, and the State Patrol at Amity was looking for the public to help. So in the off chance you know something about Clyde Coppage in 1970, he was found March 20th, 1970, so it has to be before then. They are looking to explain the circumstances surrounding his death. 585-344-6200 gets you to the New York State Police. They have funds available that they are looking to test materials and potentially link evidence to. I think they have a number of suspects in mind now that they know who he is, but they have not announced that they've solved it, and they are still asking for the public to participate in providing information if they have it. So I threw that on here. If you guys know anything about Clyde Coppage, I don't think they're looking for more information on Barbara Waldman, particularly since Thomas Generazio has been dead for 22 years now. It feels weird to say 22 years and we'll be talking about 2004.
I know. It really does. Clyde Coppage was never reported missing, it doesn't look like.
Yeah, I didn't see any evidence that he had been. I was wondering if you came up with anything there. But that's, my guess is someone knew exactly where Clyde was, which is why he didn't get reported missing.
Right. And it's interesting because that can really help investigatively, I think.
Yeah, we're living in that avalanche you've been describing for 6 years. It's like happening all around us, and like the number of cases that come through, I don't even have time to cover them all on True Crime News, even if I were just to give them 3 or 4 minutes each, you know?
Right.
So
no, yeah,
cases.
it's a lot. And DNA is, obviously in this case, the man's identified. And I think that's really important. I think it's a little more important than necessarily identifying the killers, even though like that's important. A lot of them are gone now as well, right?
Yes. We've had a couple of serial killers unmasked who were kind of known to police for something, but they definitely were not known for serial killers. And that's interesting to me because they do not get nearly the publicity you would think they would, since there's nothing to really talk about. But we've had a few true predators unmasked. At some point this year, we're going to talk a little bit about the Colonial Parkway murders. I'm hoping to have a guest on for that. But that series of murders at this point is basically solved. There's a couple of crimes that have been solved along the way that they turned out to be people that had 4 to 6 victims. We've had a guest on about another double homicide that I think we're going to talk to that guest again, and because that case is now wrapped up and it's different than we all thought it might be. I guess for me, I think, are you always kind of looking like what's going to go wrong with DNA?
Yeah, I've wondered that from the very beginning because all of the evidentiary means to identify suspects have unraveled in one way or another at some point.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty true statement. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that because one of the things that's going to start popping up this year, frauds have gotten more interesting. The people that are going to prison for fraud have gotten more interesting. Police struggle to keep up with technology. The court struggles to keep up with technology. And some of the technology that's come out kind of goes wrong from time to time, just like you're describing. I think DNA is there's a little more certainty to it. I think fingerprints is still a thing that is a valuable identification tool. It has to be used in conjunction with other tools now. But are you familiar with the concept of AI being used with license plate readers and cameras?
I am, yes.
So we get a couple times a year, I go to training and they will talk to us about the most recent technology. And one of the things that I see almost every day are these flock safety cameras. Have you seen them yet, or you just know?
I just know about them. I've never seen one. I'm not somebody that looks for cameras, but I used to at least have people in the car with me that would spot them.
Yeah. So I deal with flock cameras a lot. A lot of what's happening with that company is pretty... There's parts of it that are very open to the public, and you can see the transparency happening. But some of the things that they're doing are sort of... I would say they're sketchy, but it's not that. It's just that there may be problems in the future with how they're used.
Well, one interesting thing that now this was on television, and I can't actually remember what it was, but I have seen in some of the body cam type TV shows that come on now, like police body cams are going. I have seen where if they have a full license plate number from an alleged suspect, right, that they can be well, the last time it was picked up on a reader was here or whatever.
Right.
And I always thought that was an interesting thing. Now, that's just almost like a tip, right? Because you still got a lot of work to do from there.
Right.
But I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I saw it used in a homicide trial earlier this year, and it was from a couple of years ago. Actually, I say that it was 4 years ago that. So I was looking at old technology and how it applied, because it takes a while for homicides to come to trial. And in that case, they had used the flock camera in an area that now no longer supports the flock cameras. One of the towns has completely ended their contract. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about right this second, Flock, FLOCK, was founded as a research group back in 2017. They started out as Flock Group Inc. They're currently doing business as Flock Safety. If you look up the base description of them, I think what they're going to be described as an operator of security hardware and software. They are an American manufacturer. They've been here the whole time, headquartered out of Atlanta, Georgia. They have a couple of different interesting things that they've done. But one of the most interesting things is their ShotSpotter. They have a gunshot surveillance locator system. They also have video surveillance that they're doing. They have automated license plate recognition and reader systems. They have all the supporting software. They operate these systems through primarily government agencies, primarily law enforcement agencies, but they contract with certain commercial brands, neighborhood associations, and quite a few private property owners. So places where there are large amounts of commercial properties who are owned by like sort of a leaseholder. Like you may see a sporting goods store and a box store and a shoe store and a bunch of little businesses, but like that might all be owned by one person who also can contract with Flock. According to the claims on their website, in the end of 2025, Flock was claiming to operate across 49 U.S. states, over 5,000 communities, and they said they were performing 20 billion vehicle scans in the United States each month. Now, they use Flock Safety uses a network of cameras. They utilize image recognition, facial recognition, and they utilize machine learning. They can share data with local police agencies and departments, and they're currently like getting big on integrating this into predictive policing platforms like Palantir. Palantir is a different technology that we'll talk about at a later date. But currently, they are the biggest one who is operating, and they say that they're not primarily a law enforcement third party, but they are. They're 100%. That's all they do. They claim that their systems aid in criminal investigations. I think your description of it is probably the best one. Like they do give a lot of quote unquote tips, and those are shared with law enforcement.
Don't you think that the fact that they say that, like, we're not a sole law enforcement subcontractor or whatever, I don't really know what they would say. I think that's what causes the problem to begin with. If they would just say it, it wouldn't be a big deal.
Yeah, if they would just admit to it, like that's how they started. So this all started as a side project between 3 alumni from Georgia Tech. They decided very early on exactly what they wanted to do. They built these first Flock surveillance cameras, like by hand in one of their garages, and finalized it on a dining room table. There was a DeKalb County, Georgia detective who spoke with one of the founders, the CEO, Garrett Langley, and he said, this technology that you have out right now helped solve a home break-in. And the quote that Garrett Langley has out there is that he called the CHRO and the CTO of the company, and this was a really small project, and he said, you guys need to quit your day jobs. This is what we're doing. By 2024, there were 4,000 cities across 42 states using their fixed cameras in public locations. And by April of 2024, they employed almost 1,000 people. They've had some stumbling along the way. In June of 2024, shortly after they make all these big announcements, a circuit court judge in Norfolk, Virginia, ruled that their collection of location data constituted a search under the Fourth Amendment and could not be used as evidence in a criminal case when collected without a warrant. They basically called their ALPR, which is their automatic license plate recognition readers, the equivalent of a tracking device. And tracking devices have been found to be unconstitutionally used by police. One of the rulings that you can find on this is the United States versus Jones. The company at this time in 2024 started to receive pushback from communities who did not understand the operations of Flock. They also acquired Aerodrome. And it's interesting the way that you described the law enforcement problem, of not admitting that that's what they're there for, because that's where they make their money from. I mean, they may be paid by the municipality, but they are paid by the municipality to assist the local law enforcement agencies.
It's literally the only reason anybody would want the information they gather.
Right. That is 100% correct. Aerodrome is a manufacturer of drones for law enforcement agencies. So they start raising money in 2024 and 2025. They get really big. By the end of 2025, they announced that they're in partnership with Amazon's Ring. And they are doing this thing where they develop a software for the Ring camera, is sold to everyone as finding missing or lost pets across the U.S. because they're enhancing with AI surveillance. They aired this really stupid Super Bowl ad in 2026, and that is canceled. And that's because Ring has limited affiliations with law enforcement. They are the most affiliated of the doorbell cameras. But
what got canceled?
This search party integration that they were going to do.
So it's not going to happen anymore?
It's not going to be shared with law enforcement.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I didn't see the commercial, but I use Ring as just a monitoring system, so I don't subscribe or anything. But I saw all these things about, do this to be part of search party or whatever whenever I would open to look at, who's at my front door or whatever.
Right.
That's interesting, but I did hear the commercial was in really bad taste or something.
The animals were kind of seen as metaphors. Like, I love the idea of being able to find lost animals that way. The problem is the age that we live in and the people in this situation are only really looking to monetize what they can do with law enforcement, because that's just the state of the world right now. The most money that you can possibly get needs a military or law enforcement attachment to the contracts. They run these things off of solar panels. They're very interesting. I have one very close to my house. I have gotten close enough that people have asked questions. They integrate into Axon. Axon is another big, they ran evidence.com for years. They are another big law enforcement subsidiary, I guess, because they wholly depend on law enforcement and military. There was a product that was being developed, allegedly called Nova, through Flock. And what's interesting about Nova is I was actually pitched a version of this. And I full disclosure, I do not use a Flock product, but I do use a product that allows me to do what they're describing they want to do. They're calling it a public safety data platform, and it would make available to apparently the public things that currently you either have to be a sworn officer or a licensed private investigator in almost all 50 states to get the data that they were talking about. And that data is information about data breaches, public records, commercially available data that would allow you to financially, like, this sounds crazy, but imagine tracking someone through their rewards card for a grocery store.
That's exactly what that's for.
Right. That's what this is for. Also announced a program called The Raven. The Raven was originally similar to ShotSpotter. It was supposed to be an audio gunfire locator. And I said ShotSpotter is a Flock project. I may be wrong on that, because when I was looking back through my notes, I may have been thinking of Raven. But Raven records audio in 5-second increments, and it uses artificial intelligence to analyze sound clips for audible gunfire. When a gunshot is detected, the device estimates the location and alerts police. They did announce that there is a version of Raven coming out that would listen for sounds of human distress and then alert police. I don't know that model has made it to the public, but I sat through what I believe was a pitch about it. They did not specifically say Raven. That's something that happens at these training sessions I go to. They want you to be thinking about their products. And the reason I'm talking about Flock so much is there was this little Business Insider article that came out March 9th, 2026 by Nicole Einbinder. And I want to tell this story because it's kind of similar to what you and I were expecting would eventually happen with DNA. But I think it's happening a lot earlier with Flock. The article in Business Insider is titled Flock Flocked Up. The subtitle is How a License Plate Camera Misread Unraveled One Man's Life. So I'll tell you the story. I tried to send it to you, but I think there was a paywall on your side.
Yeah,
right?
there was.
It just says, in April 2024, Brandon Upchurch and his cousin were driving home from a convenience store when they noticed flashing lights behind them. When Upchurch pulled over, officers from the Toledo Police Department drew their guns and ordered him out of his red Dodge Ram pickup truck. Upchurch initially refused to turn off the engine or exit the truck, repeatedly asked the officers why he was being pulled over. One officer named Adrian Wilson warned that he would deploy his police canine if Upchurch didn't get on the ground. As Upchurch began to get down, Adrian Wilson released the dog. The dog latched onto Upchurch's dreadlocks and rammed his head into the ground, sinking its teeth into his arm. Wilson later said he thought Upchurch had tripped while he was getting ready to run. That's when one of the officers says, "Your car has a stolen license plate on it." But his plates weren't stolen. And Upchurch insisted this to the officers. He was transported to a hospital for his injuries, and then he was sent to the county jail where he remained for hours. The charges, which were later dismissed, were obstructing official business and resisting arrest. Upchurch, it turned out, was right. The license plates weren't stolen. He was the truck's registered owner. Police records reviewed by Business Insider show what went wrong. A camera made by the technology startup Flock Safety misread the 7 on Upchurch's plate for a 2 and pinged Adrian Wilson. In body camera footage, Wilson can be heard telling another officer after the arrest that he thought the camera hit. Flock's license plate readers are used by law enforcement agencies, businesses, and homeowner associations. Its rise hasn't been without controversy, much of which has been focused on privacy issues. Earlier this month, Amazon's Ring announced it would end its partnership with Flock amid blowback over a Super Bowl ad for Ring cameras. Flock described the decision to end the partnership as mutual. Less attention has been paid to the tech's accuracy. Business Insider reviewed police records, lawsuits, and local news coverage across the country and found that the Toledo episode isn't isolated. In a dozen instances, misreads by Flock's automated license plate readers or a lack of verification by officers resulted in people who hadn't committed crimes being stopped at gunpoint, sent to jail, or potentially mauled by a police dog, among other outcomes. When the tech works as designed, it can help locate suspects involved in crimes, track down vehicles, and improve investigative efficiency. The system gives law enforcement agencies access to huge swaths of data, and officers receive alerts about vehicles of interest while they're on patrol, such as drivers with warrants, fake plates, missing people, and vehicles flagged as stolen. Andrew Guthrie Ferguson, a law professor at George Washington University who specializes in police surveillance technology, told Business Insider that in general, errors are a part of policing and errors will be a part of policing technology. The issue is creating incentives to limit the errors in the technology. Right now, the incentives are not aligned to improve accuracy and transparency and accountability. Flock monitors and collects misread rates, but it declined to provide Business Insider with specifics about the data. When customers flag misreads, that data is pulled into the company's training set to improve its model, and the company works with local law enforcement to understand the cause of the incident. According to the spokesperson for Flock, we have strong confidence in our models and continuously improve them through ongoing optimization and testing. She said they do not publish a single accuracy figure because performance can vary depending on plate design, lighting conditions, and environmental factors. She said, we respect and value concerns and feedback raised by community members and are continuously building on our technology. We have the utmost sympathy for any victim of harm, and that is why we are committed to the work we do to solve and deter serious crimes and provide security for communities. So I'm going to pause here for a second and just talk a little bit about this and kind of get away from the article. So this is going to be a huge deal.
It sounds like it sort of already is.
Yeah, maybe that's a misstatement on my part. Maybe your statement's better. It already is a big deal.
It doesn't lie in the AI itself. It lies in the officer's actions, because in the case described in the article, if the law enforcement officer had taken the time to verify the license tag and do his own search, he would have found it wasn't stolen. I actually don't know about the general stance of this, but I think it's absolutely ridiculous that going after a car would result in like slamming people to the ground and letting dogs off on them, especially since like the police officer can't say AI told me and that be his probable cause.
Correct.
The only thing the police officer could do is get the tip from AI, and I'm saying this is what legally they should do.
Right.
And when they act like saying that AI told me, it was a stolen tag, well, that's not a valid arrest or a valid search and seizure under the Fourth Amendment. You have to take that knowledge and you have to get your own verification from it. And that's the problem.
That's part of the problem. I don't disagree with that being the problem in general. That's definitely, you described it perfectly. You described it perfectly when you said, like, the tip needs to be verified by human intelligence.
Exactly. But that's how all AI works.
The other problem, though, is it's very likely that we are entering an era where we've tipped the scales in terms of data collection. And problem is you have an unregulated company, not a government agency, collecting and selling the data on literally everyone in America, almost. Like 90% of people are traveling throughout the day, even if it's just in their town. So we're collecting hundreds of millions of people's data every day. And this company is able to stay around and make money off of it because they're selling it.
Right. So every single camera that's up had to have been placed there by the lawful inhabitant of the parcel it's on.
Yeah, the owner.
The owner. I mean, but in some cases, like, I'm sure companies, especially in like strip malls, they can have a camera up even if they don't own the building.
I see a lot of the cameras by big home improvement stores.
Right.
And those people generally don't, like, those real estate models can vary by jurisdiction. Like sometimes the Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever own it. And sometimes there's a landlord.
Sure. So in that case, having the right to put the camera up based on the owner's decision to have it, right?
Right.
The view from the camera, I mean, unless it's peeking in somebody's window, is highly unlikely that there's a right to privacy.
So I think that you're making the mistake that Flock is currently making. Data collection and privacy are two different things. You can know everything I do in public. You can't sell it.
Well, that's an interesting way to look at it.
The way that you can sell it is you make an agreement with me and I allow you to sell it.
Well,
you pay me.
But that's sort of what I was saying was, if you're out and, like, I know that the EU has really strict rules putting random people's pictures on social media.
Right.
And to my knowledge, we don't have the same rules here.
No, we don't yet.
And it's always, as far as that goes, saying like who owns the picture that's taken by the camera, right?
Right.
To the extent that that comes up, that's an issue, like what you're saying, you could very well be right. The problem is this is reactive, right? As opposed to preparing to have it not happen.
Yes.
And so because it's reactive, it's literally the extent that you can make somebody pay for it. That's what like, and then you have to get, because you could sue them and say, hey, you're selling my location, my
Right.
picture, video, whatever. You're selling it without my permission. And you've got to go through the entire court system, overcome like several things. Who knows what would happen, right?
Right.
But I'm saying it's almost like they can do it until someone tells them they can't.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it's going to be. I was a little shocked at some of the numbers they threw out in this article. And I wanted to ask you about that related to what you just said. They said a deputy police chief in Tennessee told his department in an email that he had requested access to all of the cameras within a 500-mile radius for the officers to search. So agencies can opt in to share their data with other departments. Some cases, this gives the officers the ability to search for a specific plate or car across tens of thousands of cameras across the country. So we have this police chief. He asked for a 500-mile radius, and the system says it will give him 80,000 cameras to search. Now, in Wisconsin, another sheriff's office that had opted in, they have access to over 1,000 networks of cameras. They were reading 2.9 million vehicles a month in 2025. Now, I'm sure that's a lot of repeats. But it's interesting to me because where I get lost in all of this is how, like, will they have to shut it down in terms of reactivity and start over?
I don't think that it's ever going to get to that point.
Because
I don't think you're gonna have a court order saying that can't happen. If you look at it on a smaller scale, if I catch someone on my security system cameras, right, and again, though, it's the selling of it, right?
that's what I'm saying. So it's not that they can't collect it, but here's the problem. When 404 Media reports that Flock is developing this product called Nova, that's the public safety data platform. When they report that is being sold to people beyond licensed and sworn individuals, that's fine. But if you're selling my travel pattern and my rewards information, pay me for it.
Do you think that, do you know if there's an opt-out?
I have not actually been on the platform yet. I don't think there's any way. There's not. I would have to contact them, make myself known, and then see if they had my data, and then opt out if they did have it. And that's not the way I know that's also reactive. So that's not the way.
Well, that's not really what I mean, though. What I mean is when you have the camera set up, I assume terms of service indicate that, hey, this camera footage is going to be available in this way, right?
Okay, yeah. The software, yeah.
And, but they have to disclose, there's a possibility we could sell it to whoever we want to. And is it at that point the owner of the footage, so the person who's putting up the camera, or however it's laid out in the terms of service, they have to give it basically either consent straight up or implied consent to have that happen, right? And so unless the only thing that you could do about it is if everybody opted out all at once and then say, hey, you're going to have to, compensate us for it. But as far as the people on the cameras getting compensated, I don't ever see that happening.
Yeah, it's going to have to happen for them to continue to use it, because and it'll happen one way or the other. So right now, the Falcon cameras that they're using, it is estimated they have a 15% error rate, and that is resulting in false arrests. So those people are starting to be compensated. So we're seeing that kind of play out. They give an interesting example in here about a couple that's literally just taking their 3-year-old granddaughter to a doctor's appointment, and they get pulled over by a bunch of cops. It's now all out on one of those body camera channels that you were talking about. But they got a misread from one type of camera and then a hit from another type of camera. And the two things together had misread a 0 as an O. So the second camera actually captured them and the data from their car and attached the person. And it basically put a NCIC hit together with it and like sent out what is the equivalent of a bolo with a specific car, and the car's listed as stolen, even though it's being driven by its registered owners. They get pulled over, and now they go viral because it's a terrible traffic stop and the way everything goes down, because they literally have no idea what's happening.
That sounds like that, obviously that's a glitch, but it sounds like they need to have more steps involved there to verify things.
I mean, it looked like from what I could tell, it had at least 6 steps.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, like, you can't, again, the end of that would be a BOLO was issued because AI had probable cause to believe that this was what was happening. And that's not how it is supposed to work. Right. And so the disruption that's causing it's border. I mean, I would say it's violating people's constitutional rights but it requires the action to be taken by law enforcement. Right. So law enforcement needs to be trained. And I think just get the simple statement that AI can't be your probable cause. I think that could fix a lot of these problems.
Right. And, we've had like multiple sort of technological, definitely law enforcement issues over the years. At one point, Spotify was being linked in. If you go back further in time, there were groups that were creating private prisons. Cellbrite is a big company that's had controversy over the years. Everybody remembers Edward Snowden and the PRISM program. The Stingray phone tracker, when it first came out, because it created like a cell tower that your phone would connect to. They've all had different controversies that are weirdly still slowly making their way through the court. I know California, in the last year or so, they made a state law. I think in 2024, they made a law that prohibited the sharing of this information Flock's collecting, including license plate reader data, with federal agencies. And it was revealed in the last year or so that some state and municipal agencies have been sharing it in contrast to state law. Yeah, it's interesting that you then have the law enforcement breaking the law.
Well, that just makes that's one of the craziest dumpster fires of life, honestly, where you've got the people enforcing the law, breaking the law. And, I personally, I have to laugh sometimes. I mean, the situations are rarely funny, but I love how you can tell somebody that, like, well, sir, you're actually breaking the law. And they have no idea what you're talking about. like in the case where law enforcement has now broken the law.
Correct.
And are you saying that California told, like, you can use it, but you can't share it? Or did they tell, like,
They said one of the statutes in California states that if you're a municipal or state agency of California, so local, county, state, whatever, if you are a California accredited law enforcement agency, you can use this material for your investigations. You cannot share the data that's being collected or that are parts of your contracts or agreements with federal agencies of any kind.
is that because they want the federal agency to get its own subscription?
No.
Okay.
It's to they've couched it as protecting the data of California citizens.
Okay.
It's a little confusing that they're able
From
to
the
use it for
federal
their own.
government?
Correct.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's why they wrote it in 2024. The bottom line is they didn't like some of the administration's policies in 2024, and they were looking to hopefully mitigate like problems they've been having. And I want to say that when I saw it originally, I think it was the IRS that was trying to use it. I know that I've seen Customs and Border Enforcement out there and ICE enforcement out there that have tried to use that data in California, but I think it was the IRS that like set off a series of lawsuits. And they also had a higher, so because of the population in California, just the number of people and the concentration of those people, they had a higher number of misreads. And the misreads were coming from, I think some of them were coming from NCIC, like where the information was being shared to NCIC. And then when it came back from NCIC, they were like somewhere in there, they were losing the interpretation that would have prevented some of this. And there were several jurisdictions that were forking out 5 and 6 figure settlements where people had been stopped and arrested for no good reason.
Because
So
they didn't
it comes from
verify.
that. Right.
They didn't
Yeah, 'cause-
verify because they got their probable cause from AI.
Correct. And that you
Right.
keep saying that, but that is so true. And that is what the problem is.
I regularly have very random conversations with all kinds of different people about the dangers of AI. And AI in and of itself is not dangerous. It's the application and it's people's use of it that could be the problem. It's always going to be that way.
Yeah, I've seen I've been seeing more and more Flock information coming our way. We're talking specifically about this particular case because it does some wrecking of this guy's life. The outcome for him was it's 2 years later. He's still trying to recover. The bite to his arm caused some serious injuries. He was doing lawn care at the time and working as a forklift driver. He had trouble continuing on based on his story. He gave up his dogs because he's now scared of dogs. He was eventually evicted. He sold the truck that he was driving that day because he was not able to keep up the payments on it. But you know, his story may be like kind of the outlier at this point, but the real part of it that was a problem, he settles with the police department and the officer. So Toledo Police Department and Officer Adrian Wilson settle with Brandon Upchurch for $35,000. But during this, he made a really poignant statement. And it was, if the officer had done their job, if that camera had worked, I probably still have my house, still have my truck, still have my dogs, still have my business. But my life is struck by lightning all because of this camera's misread.
It's actually struck by lightning because the officer didn't verify it.
Right. Which is,
And
I think there's going to be a learning curve for that, don't you?
I don't see why on earth anybody would take on a, like, I don't know what it would be, a felony traffic stop for a stolen vehicle without knowing beyond the computer told me so. I mean, I do get where when you put in to check it yourself, you're relying on a computer as well, but at least you know you put the correct digits in. Now, if it's a mistake at a different level, that's something else, right?
Yeah.
The one of the biggest things I think with the advancement of AI is it makes absolutely no difference how much AI technology we have when the data is bad to begin with and when people don't know how to use it. And so
Correct.
it's really an interesting thing that's going to probably slam together at some intersection in the future where we're not going to have AI will do so much that we won't have a competent society to actually use it effectively
Interesting.
because you still have to have, I mean, does it take critical thinking skills to say like, oh, I need to verify that before I act on it? Because to me, it's just common sense.
I think we've had this conversation where we need police for certain things. They're largely bat and cleanup at this point. And I think it's a very stressful job at every level. But I think ultimately the intelligence I think it's waning. The incentivizing police work over the last couple of years, it was huge during the pandemic. I sat in on so many city council meetings where they were upping the pay to keep officers on the job and to retain officers. And they sort of priced out an entire city near me. It's not my city, next city over. They priced out the entire city because now it's budget time. They can't retain everyone they have on the police force, and they don't have good police because of how they were desperate to retain people who ultimately wanted to leave. They should have let them go. They should have let those guys go. And the smart ones did leave. They went on and they're doing other things. They work in private security. They went to work for government agencies that were not the local police. And we have trouble keeping smart cops around to begin with. And now we also have trouble keeping smart cops who are up to date on technology around. It's a whole different problem.
I was going to say, I'm going to be completely honest here and say, if you're smart, you're typically not a police officer.
Well,
because you
that's
realize
the other thing that's
what
weird,
you're doing,
yeah.
And you're like, yeah, I don't want to do that anymore.
Right. Yeah, I don't have a lot on this yet. It's interesting because when I look at it all, I wonder, do we even understand what's happening with technology?
I don't think so,
now?
Based on the article, because he says something really poignant, and he blames it on AI.
Right.
But it's not AI's fault.
Well, he blames it on the camera.
Well, right.
But you're right. It's the officer's fault. And I think in his heart, he knows that because he went to whatever lawyer he got that guided him through the settlement process, which I think he settled too low, but it's neither here nor there. He focuses on the police department and the officer. So at least that part was correct.
What are you going to do? Sue a camera?
Right. Oh, no, you would sue the company that owns the camera or the company that's contracting the camera is what I'm saying.
Well, and see, something like that might get somewhere, but that is going to be a gigantic feat as far as...
Right. And I don't think it's going to be about a settlement either, do you? I think it's going to be about the use of the camera.
Right. But I'm saying that this is a situation, and I'm sure we've all come across these situations where you've got... I'm not saying I'm going to be neutral here. I'm not going to take a position. All I'm saying is you've got a company who has laid the foundation and the pathway and the connection to have this data and information, which is the footage coming in from the cameras, right? And then they do what they want with it. And you're in a situation where they basically said, we're not going to ask for permission, but we'll apologize. Or they may not apologize. I don't know, but they didn't ask for permission to do this. And in order to get all that untangled, it would take like so much litigation that I don't see happening, like from any perspective.
If you go back and look at like Cellbrite, Prism, like the litigation went on. The litigation just wasn't as shiny and interesting as like the big scandals surrounding those things. But the litigation basically said you have to have someone who's responsible for this. And ultimately, some things they put on a judge. They put on your local judge. And like, wherever you're sitting right now listening to this, someone in your jurisdiction has the ability to sign paperwork for your home to be searched, for you to be arrested. That varies, like, depending on the seriousness of the situation. So if it's just for you to be arrested, it could be that it's a magistrate. And an officer who believes that you've committed a crime can take you before that magistrate, and they can decide whether or not to detain you. And at some point, you have to see at least a district court judge, or maybe a circuit court. I think some places still have justice court. So you may be seeing a justice of the peace or another magistrate. But like, you have to see someone who's going to decide that you're held there. If someone wants to go through your home or your car or listen to your phone or get your bank records, phone records, medical records, that has to go before typically a superior court judge. So somebody's going to have to be on the hook for this. And I think you're right. I think the litigation isn't going to be about money. It's going to be about whether or not we're violating 4th or 14th Amendment rights of innocent people.
Well, the connection, so a company, in essence, can't, like Flock can't violate people's rights. They can, but the selling of it to law enforcement is where that comes in, right?
Right, correct.
Because only state actors can violate people's constitutional rights. If somebody tells you to shut up, you can't use the First Amendment as a defense to why you're not shutting up, because, that doesn't apply there. If the state tells you to shut up, then they're violating your rights, right?
Yeah.
So
and it goes back to what you said. You said the use of information,
right,
is where the rights get violated. So whoever is physically using that information is the person that's, and potentially their agency. They're the ones who are potentially violating the rights.
Right. And I think that it's going to be a fine line because of like public space versus, the privacy of your own home versus, is the whole camera system just a gigantic tip jar?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, kind of. It kind of is right now. And I think you're onto something there. And I'll say it this way because I think this is the way it all shakes out in the end, just to like make a prediction. I don't think it'll be one of these innocent people, unless there's like a shooting of an innocent person. I don't think it'll be them that change how these cameras and the other systems related to all of this. And that's everything. That's not just the Flock safety cameras, but the other things they're talking about, the other companies that compete with Flock, all of those type things. I think where that'll really come to a head litigation-wise won't be a civil suit. It will be when a murderer gets off the hook because the police misused whatever they used to track him down and arrest him. Or as, that's their key piece of evidence in a crime, whether it's somehow his audio or his video or his license plate or whatever. That'll be the moment that it actually makes its way to the Supreme Court. And we're probably 3 to 5 years from that even being a thought, let alone happening.
I was going to say, like, keep in mind, though, you got to have a defense attorney that raises that.
Right. Well, not only raises it, but gets an objection from a judge in a way that like it has a reason to be an issue on appeal when they review the trial de novo, and then to move on from there, the appeals court has to rule against it so that it then goes to the state Supreme Court or whatever, and then moves on to the federal courts so that the Supreme Court can eventually get a hold of it. It's a long process.
Right. And so that would be like 20 years from now, right? If
Correct.
it
Yeah,
gets
right,
in
right.
the pipeline now, which it's
Well, I'm
not yet
saying
that I know of.
I'm saying the pipeline problem would be sometime in the next 3 to 5 years.
Oh, right. Exactly.
That
That's what, yeah, I understood that.
yeah. And that's where it starts, but we won't, we won't see the outcome for years, which is interesting because it means it's really just a big cha-ching for Flock in the meantime and all their competitors. Like they're just going to clean up on that collection of data and sale of data. We might actually see the sale of data being ruled on before the use of like information. But again, still 3 to 5 years out minimum. I don't have a lot more on this right now. This is just a topic that's interesting to me in terms
Yeah,
of
I
like
have
law
endless
enforcement
amounts
using
of
it.
information on this topic.
Oh, I could talk on this all day. But I had one more thing I wanted to bring up. Unless, do you have something else on this right now?
No, not right now.
So you and I, back in 2023, we did a really deep dive into a story, read a bunch of books, talked to a lot of people. We published it in the podcast feed over multiple episodes in the fall of 2023. They all start with the words deep gold, the episodes that we did on that. We either did 6 episodes or 8 episodes. It's a pretty fascinating story. That story is about a guy named Tommy Gregory Thompson. To sort of synopsize what we talked about in all of that, first of all, you should go back and listen to it. It's fantastic. It's one of my favorite series that we've done.
It's really good.
think
I really appreciated how you put it together with the historical. It's just an interesting integration of things.
Right. And like, it was, I love the water. I love the ocean. I'm fascinated by treasure hunters. Tommy Gregory Thompson is a treasure hunter. He was known for a lot of really interesting, innovative stuff that he did in the discovery of the wreck of the SS Central America back in the 80s. He wrote a book with largely telling that story. He had discovered it in 1988, but it took him a few years to get legal authorization to salvage the wreck. He had to raise money. He lost a lot of money. He created this interesting RCV called the Nemo. He used somebody else's ship to get out there that he had purchased with somebody else's money. So a lot going on. From my understanding, there's a 3-part mini series out there called Curse Gold, A Shipwreck Scandal. That came out about a year after we did that series, sometime in the next year or so. And that story's largely coming to a head now. But the gist of what we were talking about, which is, I'm going to say this in just a couple paragraphs, but there's a lot more to it. Tommy Thompson, recovers this gold. He sold it for $52 million. In 2009, he had an offshore account in the Cook Islands valued at around $4 or $5 million. But in 2013, the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Ohio, they issue an arrest warrant for Tommy Thompson. And this is because the people that had given him money over the years all sued him. And it was a lot of people. He ends up in civil contempt and he fails to appear. An additional arrest warrant is issued for criminal contempt. And they basically send the U.S. Marshals after him. And in 2015, he is arrested along with his with a cohort named Allison Louise Antiquaire. They're arrested in a West Palm Beach hotel. He agrees in November 2018 to surrender 400 or 500 gold coins that were made from the wreck salvage or salvaged from it, but he claims he doesn't have access to them at the time. This could be because of some shady money dealings. And in November of 2018, a jury awards his investors $19.4 million in compensatory damages. And I think maybe 3 or 4 of that goes to the Dispatch printing company. They had put up like $1 million and some dollars towards this. And then 16 of that is going to be divided up among other investors. So April 2015,
put it into a receivership, right?
Right. At that point in time, they put it into a receivership to compensate those other investors. The reason all this is happening is because back in April 2015, he pled out a case that he had failed to appear for. He gets sentenced to 2 years in jail. He gets a fine of $250,000. That plea bargain had required him to answer questions about the whereabouts of 500 gold coins. He refused to do this. And the reasons for refusing to do this varied. Some of it were maybe there's some shady money stuff and some weird people in Belize that have taken it as compensation for something else. Maybe he's got some kind of short-term memory loss. Maybe he's just forgotten where he put them. Maybe he put them someplace he can't get back to. But since December 2015, Tommy Thompson's been in jail. He's ultimately held kind of indefinitely on that original civil contempt. And what's interesting is his 2-year sentence for criminal contempt for refusing to answer questions is not being told.
Served.
So,
yeah.
Right. Yeah, he's not serving it at that time. It's being told. So TOLLED, told, means he has to finish his civil contempt sentence, which seemed indefinite, before he can start his criminal contempt.
Right. And so he was being held in civil contempt because of a portion of his plea bargain was cooperation in the civil suit. Right?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So December 19th, 2020, multiple people talked about him for a minute, and that was because it was the 5th anniversary of the conviction of this sort of disaster that had unfolded with both the civil and then the criminal contempt. The lawyers for the different parties all had a moment in the spotlight, and they talked about, well, he'll get out as soon as he releases the missing funds. This was all done to be like a coercive compliance method to get him to comply with the court and to comply with the judgments and the convictions. By February 2025, after the release of our series, U.S. District Judge Algernon Marbley, he agreed that it was time for Tommy Thompson's civil contempt charge to be over. Specifically, he said he was no longer convinced that further incarceration would be likely to coerce that compliance I talked about. He did, however, order that Tommy Thompson immediately start serving his 2-year sentence that he had received for a related criminal contempt charge. That had been told or delayed the whole time that this civil contempt was going on. We have news. We have very interesting news that Meg and I wanted to share with you. And that is March 4th, 2026. Tommy Thompson was finally released from prison after serving more than 10 years. I thought that was a big deal.
It is a big deal. That whole case is insane.
Yeah, we aired this not really knowing where the true crime came in. There was certainly
more
some
about
things
the legal process.
Yeah. This was more about the accusations that have been levied against him, because he was certainly accused of crimes. He was also accused of, violating both civil and criminal agreements in terms of how he was supposed to comply and cooperate with the adjudication. But it was just such a fascinating story to talk about. This ship went down so long ago. And again, I point people back to Deep Gold because I'm not going to go into the whole thing here. But the SS Central America, which had originally been the SS George Law, it was launched in October of 1852. And within 5 years, like just a couple weeks before its 5th anniversary on the sea, it sank on September 12th, 1857. And it had been laden with 9.1 tons of gold that had been prospected during the California gold rush. That is a huge deal. The fact that we're still talking about it in 2026 and it's sort of been recovered and there's all these interesting facets to it. It made for a great series with Deep Gold. But you and I were I'm texting when this happened. And what did you think that he's now been released?
It's about time.
Right?
It really is. I mean, it's the craziest story because you've got this guy that was a dreamer and an inventor, actually like getting, accomplishing a goal, which was to find the ship and then find a way to get the gold off the ship. And then all of a sudden, I think it said as soon as he got back from his trip, like finally finding it, that like the vultures started circling. I mean, he was sued repeatedly by all kinds of people that, they had paid out claims to the passengers on the ship because there were survivors from the shipwreck, right?
Yeah, there was this crazy insurance company connection. He basically stepped off on the dock and got hit with so many lawsuits.
It was like, I want to say like 85, like immediately. And
yeah, it was 85. I think it ballooned to like 320.
My position on that was he lost his mind because he was a dreamer, essentially. I mean, he was a very smart dreamer, inventive dreamer, resourceful dreamer. And like people had invested in him, basically. And I couldn't figure out, like, besides, it would be very overwhelming to come back from accomplishing your dream and all of a sudden all these people who did nothing, they want the spoils of your work, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's where his brain just broke because based on the whole story, which again you'd have to go back and listen to our coverage of that, it's November of 23, right?
Yeah.
Deep Gold.
October, November. Yeah, it basically runs from Halloween to Christmas in 2023.
Okay. And we talk all about this, but it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense based on sort of the facts that are laid out that he didn't get all the gold, do something with the gold, pay everybody off, right? It's
Right.
a weird situation. And I'm telling you, it's because his brain was broken when he came back and he realized that, like, I can't even really, I don't know that there's a catch-all phrase for it, but it's like when you realize that thing that you've been working so hard for, like you could have worked really, really hard or did nothing at all and it would have turned out the same.
Yeah. Yeah, he almost like ends up in it's almost like a catatonia that he ends up in, where he's in a state that, like, I think you would feel kind of worthless that nothing you did worked. I think that's
and everybody wanted to take it away from him.
Right. And that would definitely make you paranoid. It would make you distrustful. And I think ultimately there was a level of fame that came with all this starting in the late 80s and sort of in certain circles, at least, rising to that bell curve. And I think the top of that, where Tommy Thompson was sort of peaking as being this like Indiana Jones style figure in certain circles, I think it contributed to that as well. I don't think he ever wanted that. He really just wanted to hunt treasure, find treasure, live with treasure. That's what he wanted. And there were business people involved along the way that, like, if they look real hard and honestly at themselves, they share like some of this fault or responsibility. There's a lot of people along the way that were pretty helpful. And I tried talking to all of them. We did not know at the time that we were covering it that the documentary was being shot, and the post-production began as we like put our episodes out. And we had tried to talk to quite a few people and they did not want to talk to us at the time, but then called like a year later and they're like, okay, we're ready to talk now that the documentary is coming out. And I wish I had timed that a little better, because I think we would have gotten at least 3 people. It would have been cool to have their side of the story. I ultimately ended up declining because just doing pre-interviews with them and kind of talking, and I'm not going to name who they are, but I just felt like part of me realized what might be wrong with Tommy Thompson was everybody around him wanted something. Because
Well,
all those
definitely.
people seemed like they wanted something, fame or money or power or something.
And
And I don't really do well with that idea.
well, right. And it broke him. And I believe he's 73 years old at this point. I could be wrong, but
That sounds right to me, I think. Yeah.
right. And he spent the last 10 years, over 10
He's
years.
73 now. Yeah.
He spent over 10 years in jail for a clause in a criminal plea agreement, essentially.
That came from a
And
civil agreement.
okay, so we don't have debtor's prison in the United States.
Yeah, he did not cooperate, and he failed to appear after not cooperating for civil proceedings and was judged by. So basically, they had to go and get him. So they were holding him in civil contempt over that, but it became criminal contempt when they essentially adjudicated him a liar for violating the civil agreement.
He has been held in civil contempt this whole time.
Right, but he had a 2-year sentence that he was going to be doing
That
for
was for
the
the
failure to appear. Which
Right.
that was the crime that was criminal contempt. Because failure to appear in and of itself is not a crime. It
Right,
is
but
when
you
you
typically
continue
don't
to
get-
fail to appear.
You
Right.
typically don't get 2 years for it.
Correct. This was very unusual. And on top of that, one of the things that came out in the order from February 2025 was that he had been levied $1,000 a day fine. And when I looked at it in the order, they had calculated it to the day, and it was something like $3.4 million.
Right.
And then on top of that, they still expected him to participate in the recovery of the gold. He was either deep in a catatonic state or psychosis or something, or he is the most patient man on the planet.
I think that it was out of his. I think that the whole Belizean trust thing, I don't believe it. I think somebody conned him out of it, and I don't think he has the details to give him. This is my own personal opinion. I think if he could have done anything, he would have, because he's an explorer who's been stuck in jail for 10 years or over 10 years. And if he had the information, why wouldn't he have given it up? The other thing is, will they hold him again in civil contempt if he doesn't pay that fine?
I do not know the answer to that question, but
But it's
I am.
on the same level now, right? It is.
I don't. Yeah, I think maybe at this point, I think he served his time for anything they could do to him related to this particular set of accusations.
Well, and my whole point with, besides the fact that it's a super fascinating story with regard to what initially happened to the ship, what happened when Tommy Thompson was searching for it, all that's very interesting. But the reason, we sort of told all that was because it was very interesting that, in 2023, it was possible that this, terrible situation could be happening, right? And nobody was doing anything about it, essentially, because he shouldn't have been in jail like he was. That was ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think you started to make a comment here that you've made before, and that is that we don't have a debtor's prison, and you're not supposed to be able to do that to people.
No, he should not be. Well, honestly, what should have happened was the plea agreement for the criminal charge should not have included anything to do with the civil charge. Perhaps they wouldn't make that agreement. And so in that case, he should have gone to trial for his criminal charges as opposed to making the plea. Because when he made the plea, that's when they had that leverage, and they did it on purpose. But if he had gone to trial, it would have ended one way or the other.
But he's out. He is out. He walked free March 4th, and I wanted to share that with people because I definitely like when stories that we cover have at least an ending to the questions we had, even if it doesn't end the entire story and it doesn't answer all of our questions. It answered quite a few of them, and he did get out.
Well, and that was what I really wanted to happen. I really wanted him to have freedom again, because that whole saga and how much research we did on it and everything, it made me feel like more powerless than I think possibly any situation I've ever looked into.
Yeah. There was it's weird because you and I cover so many terrible things that happen to people, but that one was a situation that I think powerless is a good word. He had lost control of his own life by simply living what is essentially a childhood dream. And I think there's a lot of people that have dreams like that, and they're like, they live their life toward that goal. Maybe they, take turns along the way, but they're ultimately trying to achieve something that just, they want to go to space. They want to be a lawyer. They want to be a teacher. They want to be a doctor. He wanted to be a treasure hunter and became one of the greatest treasure hunters of our time. Got anything else on Tommy Thompson?
Nope. I hope that he has a peaceful rest of his life.
Yeah. So glad you got out, dude.
Special consideration was given to True Crime Excess by LabRottiCreations.com. If you have a moment in your favorite app, please go on and give us a review or a 5-star rating. It helps us get noticed in the crowd. This is True Crime XS.
You fall like the stars. I break things like guitars. Thick skin, no scars. We're in trouble, we took it too far. I don't want to go, but it's 'cause I'll disappoint ya. It's all I've ever dreamed of, something I cannot let go of. I hate the competition, this culture's like a gym, and I lost the motivation to get fit in your expectations.
True Crime Excess is brought to you by John and Meg. It's written, produced, edited, and posted by John and Meg. You can always support True Crime Excess through Patreon.com, or if you have a story you'd like them to cover, you can reach them at TrueCrimeAccess.com. Thank you for joining us.